The usual thing here, we need our boilerplate code, and I guess the best place to copy it would be from here, the scan data path. We'll just drop that back down here, and there is a return data, so we're going to just wipe out the guts of this thing and go with our boilerplate code, and the function name's got to change. And we got 2 inputs instead of 1, so this got to come down here. And that's files to load is the first one. And the second one is context name. Okay, now the second parameter is a string, but the first one is an array. So we do need a JSON.stringify here. That way this array will actually be dumped out properly when we go to do it. And we got the end. I'm going to change this return and call it parsed. Oops. Parsed data file. So that'll be our return, and I'm going to copy paste that right in here as well because we need to log it. And this does need a stringify as well, so we'll just leave that stringify right there. Alright. Yeah. Now, in here, we'll have some lets. So I'm going to say let found system data equals false. Oops. False. And let system config file name equal framework.system.json, and let application config file name equal application.system.json, and let merged data equal open close curly brace. So we're just declaring that as an object. And let parsed data file equal the same thing, open close curly brace. Okay. You're not too far behind, so I'm going to keep going. We'll say I'm going to put a note in here. And this is an important note because, well, you'll see here in a minute. Before we load all configuration data, we need to first, all uppercase, first load all the system configuration settings. And the reason why is there will be a system configuration setting. Oops, hey Peter, I think you went on your vertical monitor, and yeah, there you go. Okay, I got it back now. Let me blow it up. Okay. There will be a system configuration setting that will tell us if we need to load the debug settings or not. And that's important because there's a lot of debug settings. There is a whole lot of debug settings. And if we load all of the debug settings, it can bog the system down. It can slow it down noticeably. Now, when I say noticeably, I mean maybe an extra anywhere from ½ second to 3 seconds. Now, when you're dealing with a really fast system, 3 seconds can be a long time to wait. Like, you're sitting there twiddling your thumb going, when is this thing going to be done loading? Because 3 seconds, you want it to be loaded up already. This thing should be, like, zippy. And 3 seconds is a long time to wait. And so if we don't need to load those debug settings, we shouldn't. We shouldn't have to. We shouldn't have to even think about it. And so I'm putting another setting in here to disable the loading of debug settings, because it just adds overhead. Like we don't need it. If we don't need it, let's not just waste the time doing it. So that's why that note is there, because we want to make sure that we're optimizing our execution. Okay. For let I equal 0, I less than files to load dot length plus, okay, and that's a big for loop. And then we say let file to load equal files to load, and that's the ith iteration. If file to load dot includes system config file name, or to load dot includes application config file name, data file equal pre-process JSON file. So we're going to here file. It's going to be another function that we're going to implement inside this data broker. It'll probably be the last function. And then we've got another big note here, really big note. This is the biggest note of all.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're probably going to hate me for it. Okay. Note. In this case, we have just loaded either the framework configuration data or the application configuration data. And nothing else. So we can just assign the data to the multi-merge data. We will need to merge all the other files. That's a comma. But there will be a setting here we should examine to determine if the rest of the data should even be loaded or not. And that's what I was talking about. If we don't want to, if there's a setting that says don't load the data, then let's not waste the time loading the data. Okay. And we will have a new data if all the extra debug settings should be loaded or not. And then this way the application performance can be seriously optimized to greater levels of lean performance. In other words, it's going to keep it running fast. Adding all that extra debugging configuration settings can affect load times and application performance to a much lesser degree. So that's an important note. Multi-merge data system equals open close curly brace. And that's because we're just declaring that this is where the system settings are going to go. Multi-merge data, same thing. System equals data file. So now we're storing the data file on this multi-merge data system storage. I'm going to say found system equals true. If found system data equals true, then we want to break because it's a for loop. So we're just looking for that system data. Once we've found it and we've loaded it, then we're good. Now I'm coming past 2 curly braces. Now you're doing that. Found system data equals true. So after the break, 2 curly braces down, and we have, I want to give an extra space, and we have now, we need to determine if we should load the rest of the data. So, if multi-merge data system, and then we're going to have another one called system.enable debug configuration settings. And then another nested if, which is compound. So if multi-merge data system.enable debug configuration setting equals true, or a new line, and I'm going to indent, so I'm following in line with my if, so these are together because it's a multi-line if. Multi-merge data system, and then system dot enable debug configuration settings dot to uppercase, because it could actually be a string, and if it is, we want to treat it like a string and not a Boolean value. True, okay, because it might not have been really done. Now that's the beginning of that if.
Why do you have it there twice?
It looks like it's there twice, but I'm checking the first if condition is checking it if it exists. In other words, did we load it?
But why is it in dual arrays?
And this needs to be.
So you have system in the array and then the system enable bug.
Because there's a whole lot of settings that take up the system at the system level, but then this is considered part of the namespace. So the namespace of the setting is system.enable debug configuration setting. And we're going to, it's a string, which is why it's all one string. But when I go to address this thing, I need to consider that it's part of this system thing out here, which is why I have the full namespace. So if I try to access it, it's going to be accessed by system.enable debug configuration settings. So it's kind of a misnomer, it looks like, a little bit. You know, really, this is sort of like a throw forward, a conceptual throw forward to the new configuration system that we're going to have, because it is going to be a namespace-based configuration system. So it's going to have the full address as part of the setting. And you'll see that when we get into building the other one, because it's a much more hierarchical system. This system is very flat. It's just got the name there, system.enable debug configuration settings. But it hints at what's coming, which is a non-flat configuration system. And the first one is just making sure it exists. The second one is checking if it's a Boolean true. And then I've got this compound OR, and I'm checking it as a string to do the same thing. So it may look a little bit confusing, but right now it's actually fairly simple. Now, inside that if, we're going to have another for loop to load more files. For let j equal 0. We used an I in the last loop. Let I equal 0. This one's going to be let j 0. Let j equal 0. J less than files to load dot length. Oops. Dot length. J plus plus. Okay. Let file to load equal files to load j. If not file to load dot includes system config file name and not file to load dot includes application config file name now here I have another and. It's still part of the same if condition. File to load dot to uppercase dot includes dot JSON, all uppercase. So it's basically got to be a JSON file. This prevents us from loading HTML or other files that we don't want to load. Now that was a pretty complicated if condition. Two nots and includes as a compound and. Alright, inside there we're going to say let data file equal pre-process JSON file to load. Couple lines down and I'll say if not multi-merge data debug settings multi-merge data debug settings equals open close curly brace. Basically we're gonna, if we're loading debug settings, we want to make sure to create our debug settings. Multi-merge data debug settings equals data file. So we're going to store that data file and merge it with the debug setting. Else, basically, if we've already created the debug settings, then we're going to do something special. Let's say object.assign, and this is a special way of merging data. Multi-merge data debug settings data file. This is our special way of merging multiple data objects together. And I'm going to give a special tip here. I should probably follow this a little bit more rigorously myself, but it's a useful thing to know. And that is you see it now. We're going to drop 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 curly braces down. It's very easy to get confused as to what curly brace went with what. So what I like to do is click over each curly brace, and you'll see where it sort of began, and then you can actually add an inline comment at the end of it. And what I'll do is at least add the first line of the if condition. If it's a really long one like that, then I've actually indicated what that if corresponds to. And I'll actually say end if, like this. End if, and that's the if condition. Now this one looks like it ends on the end of the for loop. So I'll say end for loop. I'll just say end for, and I'll copy paste this condition of the for loop. And then this one ends at the end of this condition, so I'll just copy that, the first line. End if, and paste. And then this one looks like it is the end of something up here. Where? What? Oh, this one right here. Okay. And if, like that. So now my code, if I look at my code, like I can make sense of where these things are ending, what they correspond to. Otherwise I might get lost. Like my eyes just have trouble because there's a big bunch of stuff going on there. This one right here, that one is this for loop, so I could say, just copy that and say end for, and paste it. So now I could easily look and see where my code blocks are, ending, beginning, elsing, or ending.
Well, that's just recommended, right? I mean, I don't necessarily need to do that.
Yeah, you wouldn't need to do that here, but it's a good idea to get in your head, and it's a good best practice, especially if you need to maintain the code. Maybe not for this particular iteration, but if we ever get into the real framework and you see that this was not done, I'd go ahead and do it, just as a matter of being responsible, even if somebody else didn't do it. I would go ahead and fill it out like that so it makes sense, or it can be followed. It's a big maintainability thing. Okay, that's the end of that function. Oh, there's one more thing we have to do. After all of that, before we actually go, we need one more line. Parsed data file equal multi-merge data. So we do need to assign that back over so it can actually be participating in the return process. And then we're ready to go write our next function, which is function pre-process JSON file. And it takes one parameter, file, to load. Okay, ***, and there's the header. At function pre-process JSON file. The parameter takes a type string. Oops, I need to write my description. At description, load all of the data from a single JSON data file. And This param is the fully qualified path to the file that should be loaded. And it's going to return a type object. Which is the JSON data object that was loaded from the specified JSON data file. And I'll sign it. And date it. Okay. And where can I copy this from? I guess I'll copy it from Chief Configuration? No, Warden. Yeah, here's a decent file. Boilerplate code. Let me get it back for you. Okay, data broker, there we go.
Do you need the name and date for every function? I mean, I have it at the top here.
Yes. No, I do it for, make sure we do it for every function. Some places even require you to add a change log to the function header. So if you go and modify it, then you need to put your date and what change you made. There's a couple differences. This has to come out, of course. Can't have that junk in there. Pre-processed JSON file is the function name. And it's file to load, not config data. And it's a string, so we don't need to stringify it. Okay, I'm going to say let data file equal file operations get JSON data. And we're going to pass it the file to load. Alright, and then we need, I need a new console log here to log the days loaded. So the data file is, and this one does need to be stringified. JSON.stringify. The end is there, and return data file. The next piece is the module.exports equals, open close curly brace, don't forget the semicolon. And we're only exporting 2 of these 3 functions. We're not exporting all 3 because we don't need the pre-processed JSON file to be exposed outside of this file. So we just need those other 2. Scan data path, and that's data path. Arrow function goes to scan data path with the data path input. Okay? And then the other one is load all JSON data. And that takes 2 inputs, so files to load and context name. Arrow function again. Load all JSON data. Files to load. Context name. Same deal. Alright. Yep, so that's the end of the data broker.
Should we, I guess before we continue, should we hold on for Anna to see if she's caught up with me?
I don't think she's going to be because she's got a number of other things to implement. Most notably is the configurator, which we did yesterday. So I'll probably have to work with her a little bit more. File operations, that's right. So that goes under Exutrix. New file. It's file operations.js. I'm going to collapse that and let me bring it up over here. Okay, so we got to do the header. At fileOperations.js. At module fileOperations. At script contains all of the functions required to do file operations. Multi-line on a physical / virtual hard drive and or mounted volume. New line, including loading files, saving files, reloading files, resaving files, copying files, moving files, copying folders, including copying folders recursively, zipping files, and saving zip packages as part of a deployment or release process. Requires module data okay, let me just get the path and all of that business out of the way. Main, let's just copy it out of main. I can just copy this. Alright, but we do need, before we do anything else, we do need something else here. At requires open curly brace at link https://www.npmjs.com package /fs pipe fs. So you have to do that. File system.
What are you referencing? The module packages from npm?
Yeah. This file is a little bit more involved because we're dealing with low-level stuff. Okay. So, very first thing we need here is let d equal require /structures /data. Let fs, that's for file system, equal require fs. And let path equal require path. Now this is different enough that the only really good place to copy paste is the base file name and the prefix. There's more stuff that I have to add here. So I'm going to just copy paste these 2 lines out of some other file. And there's more stuff that has to happen in between here. And this is Exutrix. So yeah, pretty much everything else, it just makes sense to just write it. But those 2 lines could copy over. Now, other stuff we need is let files collection equal open close square brackets because it's an array. We need a const directories to skip equal browser components. Node modules. Any folders with www in them. Any folders with the word platforms. any folders with the word release, any folders with the word documentation, and there's a little bit more. Any folders with the words or word recycle, and any folders with the word trash. So we want to make sure we skip all those conditions.
Wouldn't that go on a configuration file though? Not.
Yeah, it could, but it necessitates that we've got to have that data loaded. And I suppose it could be loaded as part of a require statement. I've never seen a need to put it in one yet. It could be moved there in the future, you're right. It's a good thought. Most of the configuration files here are loaded at runtime, of course, so that would have to be configuration that's basically like a compile time kind of file. Alright, so next we need enable files list limit equal false. Let files list limit equal -1, -1, and let hit file limit equal false. Now the reason why we need all this stuff is because the function we're going to be implementing, for some strange reason, the way it was implemented, it requires access to global stuff. Function get JSON data, and we'll take a one parameter path and file name. Don't forget the semicolon. You don't do that, I guess. Okay, and then / is the header. At function, scroll down, get JSON data. At description, loads the specified file and parses it into a JSON object with an S in the parentheses, objects, or object. And the param is of type string. The description is the path and file of the JSON file that should be loaded and parsed into JSON objects.
All right.
The return is an object. And the description is the JSON object as it was loaded from the file with minimal to no additional processing. Sign it. Date. Oops, that should be a uppercase the. My bad. Alright, so now the contents of this function, I think we can just copy paste again. The body, I'll just go from the pre-processed JSON file on the data broker. Seems like a decent place to copy a boilerplate code from. function name, get JSON data. Yep, that works too. Get JSON data, which has to be the function name, and the parameter is path and file name, so we'll paste that right here. It's a string, so we don't need JSON stringify. I'll take out the implementation because that's not what we're doing. Let's see here. The return is going to be, I'm going to give it a name, parsed data. That's what we're going to be returning. So stringify that. Yes, we do need to stringify that. And that's the return also, parsed data. Path and file name equals path.resolve path and file name. We probably don't need to do that, but it's good practice for being cross-platform support. And then I'm going to say let raw data equal fs dot read file sync path and file name. And then I need to have a curly bracket right here, and I need to say encoding colon all uppercase UTF-8. That's the file encoding for the international standard of ASCII, 8-bit ASCII. International standard. Okay, so that means basically we can understand that the file encoded could be encoded with Korean, Japanese, Chinese traditional, Chinese simplified. It could have Spanish characters in it, Portuguese characters, Russian Cyrillic characters. That's the UTF-8 ASCII standard. Okay, and then we say let parsed data equal JSON.parse raw data. So not JSON stringify, JSON parse. And that'll take raw data read from an ASCII encoded file and convert it into a JSON parsed data object. Now, if we were really being, oops, I didn't spell this right. This should be resolved. If we were really doing this a little bit safer, like I don't know if you're, you're on mute right now, but I don't know if you remember the song, The Safety Dance. It's like from the 90s.
No, I don't think so.
You don't remember The Safety Dance?
I'll have to hear it.
Let me go look that one up. Now I've got to go find it. It's by a group called Men Without Hats. So, yeah, that song just popped into my head. There's a safer way of doing this because, and that's why the safety dance came up. But if you do a file system, read file sync, there's all kinds of stuff that could go wrong with this file sync. Like say for instance, there's a corrupted file on a sector on the hard drive, or you're in the middle of reading it and there's a head crash. These things do happen, as unlikely as they might be, or it could be a network failure or something on a mounted volume. It could be anything, right? You could have be right in the middle of reading an ASCII file that has configuration, and right when you're in the middle of reading it, there's a power outage, and maybe your UPS kicks on, but it's the network that drops, or I could come up with a million different ways that this could actually fail. The safer way to do it would be to do a try and do a try block, and then do a catch, E, and then you just do a console.log error :space plus E, and then you're logging your error message, whatever error message that is, and you'd want to put this raw data inside your try. And you could probably put the JSON.parse in there as well, because I can imagine all kinds of ways that somebody could format JSON incorrectly, which could also cause a similar style of problem. This would probably be a safer way of doing it, and I think I would probably prefer to go this route. Yeah, I would say this is a smarter approach.
Oh, I see.
Because you can never account for every possible scenario that these two lines could fail on. And if you're catching it as an error and then you error log it, then at least you've indicated to the user that something went wrong, and there's no possible way for you as a programmer to deal with it. There are ways that could be done a little bit better, but at least this gives some feedback to the user that there was an error that happened. This is what the error is, and now it's up to the user to try to figure out what went wrong. And like I said, there are possible better things you could do to take consideration of that. Yeah, I would go ahead and change it to do this. Put a try and then a catch with an E around those two lines. The let raw data. Oh, you know what? We can't do that per se. We do need to have our lets up here. Raw data and comma parsed data. And then I'll just remove the lets from here, because if we declare them, then they're only going to exist inside the try, and there's no way we would ever be able to stringify it down here, even if it did work. So we do need to have it like that. And I'm going to make that change over in the framework, just because it's such an important thing. Let raw data, parsed data. Like it's kind of key, right? It's key to error handling, and error handling can make all the difference in the world when it comes to an actual error scenario. I'll remove those lets, and we'll have a catch. And it should be e.message. MSG. I think it's message, or is it message? I think it's message. There you go. And that's following the safety dance. There we go. The reason why people don't put error is because sometimes the word error is a reserved word. And that's why people just put E. But I think in JavaScript it might be okay. I don't know. Anyways. Okay, so we've implemented that function. Now we're ready to go to the next one. The last one for today. And that means we're going to have a few more functions to implement to finish up this file operations. It's function read directory contents. Directory is the parameter name, and get the semicolon and the header. Okay, the header says that function read directory contents, and the description is a little bit long. It says this function acts as a wrapper for calling read directory synchronously. That function is recursive. Also, that function doesn't technically return anything. It works with a global variable that needs to be, that needs to be reset after the work is done with it. So these are the things that this wrapper function can do. And the type is a string. The path that needs to be scanned. Object is the return. An object containing any an array of all the files in the folder and all subfolders. Assign it with my name. Date it.
You think you can just copy and paste that note for me?
Yeah. It's a big one. It makes me want to go listen to that safety dance video now. And the next function we'll implement is going to be that read directory synchronously, which is the recursive one. And so it's the one that's the really complicated one. And it looks like when we get into that read directory synchronously, it's already got a bunch of try catches in it. So I think we're actually good there. Yep, okay. We'll resume this tomorrow. I think we can keep going. And we have to implement this function. And then the really big one is the read directory synchronous. And that's the recursive one. And then we have one more function after that, but it's an empty function. I'm not even using it. It's a good function we're going to need at some point. So I'll just, I went ahead and implemented it. It's got a header, but it's just a boilerplate code, and we're not even exporting it.
Sure.
So I just leave it in there. It's called clean root path. But other than that, yeah. So we have like 1, 2.5, 2 3/4 functions to implement for the rest of this file. And then the module exports, and that's it. So I think we can get this done tomorrow. The only thing after that is loggers, which is pretty darn sophisticated. I'm trying to bring it up right now, but it's not. There's the loggers and there's the timers. And the timers is a really tiny function that's essential. We're probably not going to get to the point where we get to use the loggers, but it would be good if we went ahead and started implementing it. We probably won't actually get around to really using it until like training 3, probably not even training 2. But we can try. It's good to have it in there and get it started anyways, because it's something that we want to work towards.
Right.
So, all right, that should be good. Yeah, we'll continue working on this tomorrow. I'm gonna make sure I save here.
All right, sounds good, man. You have a good night.
Yeah, have a good evening. Bye bye.
Later. Bye.